Okay, UFC Makhachev versus Volkanovski is a stacked pay-per-view card this weekend with massive implications for two divisions going into this year, and I'm going to be plowing through every fight on the card, starting in this video with the prelims. If you had a look at my prediction videos for featherweight and lightweight, some of these predictions may not come as much of a surprise, but I'd recommend having a look anyway. There is a lot of value this week, and hopefully I can build on what has been a pretty solid start to the year. Let's get into this. Now, fight one will be contested at lightweight between Tukhugov and Brenner. So I'm going to be picking Tukhugov here, who, despite being Russian, is considered to be more of a striker and is a damn decent one at that. He has some losses, split decisions to Dawodu, who is pretty solid, and of course my boy Money Moik. So of course we can forgive that. He beat the shit out of Kevin Aguilar and had a UD win over Ricardo Ramos, which is fine. Now, Brenner, there is very little information on this guy, and building up the metrics on him for a comparison was tricky. So I'll have to go on his actual performances of late. His only losses have come in decisions, so he's proven to be scrappy in there and difficult to finish. He also seems to do most of his work on the ground, which I think this makes for a more difficult matchup here. The pick for me is Tukhugov. I'm going to call it by decision, with Brenner possibly being dropped at stages and having to survive a few tricky moments. But yeah, I'd go Tukhugov. Okay, second fight on the prelims is a matchup between Shane Young and Blake Bilder. I'm going to pick Bilder in this one. Now, his record does say 7-0. He is a underdog coming into this one. 7-0 might suggest that he's inexperienced, but he has had a pretty good amateur career, which, as I've suggested before, is always a good indicator of how serious someone is about the craft. He's equally adept at striking from both stances, so should leg kicks come into the equation, I think he's more explosive and measured in his striking choices. Shane Young is a very solid contender, but he was the recent victim of a vicious head kick KO by Ludovic Klein, and even though he's bounced back somewhat with the UD loss, I'm always wary of fighters who have had their lights shut out, especially not that long ago. Blake is pretty capable on the mat, and he's pretty good standing, and I always tend to favor fighters that have multiple avenues to get the job done, as you know. I reckon this one will be scrappy, and I'm picking Blake to get a flash KO, maybe late in the second round. Young is durable, so a UD Blake win is a decent shout also. Right, where's my coin? No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that this time. Third fight is a scrap between Loma Lookboonmee and Elise Reed. I actually quite like Loma Lookboonmee, and I'm going to go for her to win in this one. She's very tough. When she applies a tie clinch, she's really good, and I'm expecting big sections of this fight to take place against the cage, where Loma could really do some significant damage and rally up the points she's going to need to edge out the rounds. She's a decent enough striker, and in a division where KOs are kind of at a premium, she should feel pretty secure picking her shots and being comfortable wherever the fight takes place, be it at distance or up close. Reed has a decent enough record with a notable win against Corey McKenna, but she then pissed it all up the wall by losing to Sam Hughes, which is a horrible loss, and also a common opponent between herself and Loma. Loma beat her in a fairly lopsided decision. If you're making a play, I would go with over 2.5 rounds, and I expect Loma to see this one out by being more aggressive and rallying up the significant moments where they count in a fairly scrappy but conclusive unanimous decision win. There is an apparent fight that's going to, before I mention this one, there's a fight that's apparently taking place with Cortez Acosta and an unnamed opponent, but, you know, I think Cortez looked trash in his last one, so I'm going to be avoiding that fight anyway, even when a fight is announced. I don't think I could trust making a decision with him and anyone else, so I'm just not going to. So the next fight I'm looking at is one between Jenkins and Shainis. Now, this is an easy one for me. I'm taking Jenkins to win this one. He looked very, very impressive for me in his Contender Series bout, and he seems to be improving at a very impressive rate. He has shown he can carry his power and finishing ability into later rounds, and this is a really good sign for me. He's also rocking some sick 1980s porn star mustache, and I think you have to be crazy confident to walk around looking like such a plum. So that, again, fills me with confidence on this guy. Shainis really embarrassed himself in his last bout by getting choked out in under 30 seconds, and that was against Sadiq Yusuf. And while he has had some nice TKO wins to his name, I think Jenkins is just better than him everywhere. And I think he's going to prove this on Saturday night. I basically think they're giving Jenkins a layup here in an attempt to get the Aussie crowd like buzzing. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I'm calling Jenkins to win this one by KO in the first or second round. I think it's a fairly safe play too. Right, this is where I'm going to go against the grain again. This one is at lightweight between Jamie Mullarkey and Francisco Prado. Now, Mullarkey is being heavily favored to win here, and he is a very decent fighter. But I'm picking Prado in this one. Prado is exceptionally strong and well-rounded, and while he has less experience against high-level competition, I believe this is his first bout in the UFC. I think Mullarkey has shown that he's vulnerable to explosive power, and Prado really has this in spades. I was pretty high on Mullarkey, and I actually picked him, I don't know what I was thinking, to beat Jalen Turner, and he got fucking whooped. Turner is good, but it was his performance against Johnson, and I mean Mullarkey's performance against Johnson, who, don't get me wrong, the guy's a legend, but he carries a pretty small frame, and at this stage, he's been in so many wars. I think eking out a close decision in that one was really alarming to me, and I just think that Prado presents enough problems here, and is being really undervalued as a heavy underdog. As I've said in situations where I see clear avenues for a dog to win, and especially such a heavy one, I tend to pick them. And I think there's value here for that reason. Mullarkey's very good, and I'd be happy to take an L here. But I just don't trust him anymore after his last two. I'm taking Prado to win by KO, possibly in the second round after hurting Mullarkey in the first. I think it's going to be very similar to what happened with him and Jalen Turner. Okay, the next fight's at flyweight between Ross and Clayton Rodriguez. I'm taking Clayton. Ross got his ass whooped on the Contender Series and is really lucky to be getting this opportunity. He has both a TKO loss and a submission loss in 2 of his last 3, which doesn't really fill me with confidence. He does, however, have home advantage, so maybe he gets a buzz off the crowd. He's got a bit of home cooking, and it might turn him into Superman for 15 minutes, but I'm not banking on it. Clayton is coming off a split decision loss against Vergara, which isn't amazing, but Vergara did put up a really decent fight against Tyra, who we saw in the last card, who looked incredible. And he managed to keep pace with him for the better part of 2 rounds. So the fact that Clayton has a loss against him is not terrible. I also think that Ross is really vulnerable on the ground. So I think Clayton just drags him down and finds himself in the position where he can get a submission. So that's what I'm calling. I'm calling a second round submission win for Clayton, and the crowd to boo and potentially shower the cage with empty Foster's cans at that point. All right, now we're on to, I guess we can call this the co-main event of the prelims. Let's give it a little boost. This is a great matchup between Culibao and Bagdasaryan. Now, honestly, I'm torn on who to pick for this one. Of all the fights I've looked at, this one is the one I'm the least confident on so far. Culibao, by appearance, he looks like a little bit of a soft body. He's not very athletic, but he's been really impressive in his last few. He starched a few guys. Melsik, while he's less experienced on paper, has also been putting in some good performances. This one should be a stand-up affair, unless someone decides to throw a spanner in the works and go for takedowns, which could really be an interesting choice. I don't expect it in this one. I'm not overly confident, but I'm going to take Melsik in this one. I think Culibao actually carries more of a KO threat, with Melsik being more of the busier of the two, and that kind of plays out in the significant strikes statistics, where Culibao does have kind of more of a destructive punch on him, with Melsik being more of a volume guy. I think in a fight where both are pretty skilled, it's these kind of stats that kind of edge it for me. I wouldn't be surprised if Culibao catches him and knocks him out. He's very dangerous, but I'm going to go with the volume guy. I'm going to go with Melsik. I also believe this won't go to distance, so that might be a decent play to make if you're struggling like I am to pick a winner in this one. Now, we're finally onto the main event of the prelims. This should be a really nice scrap between Pedro and Bukauskas. If this fight takes place a few years ago, 100% I'm picking Bukauskas. He was cut from the UFC after a really nasty injury against Khalil Roundtree. He took a really bad leg kick. And just before that, he was brutally KO'd by Jimmy Crute, who I'm going to get into when I look at the main card. He bounced back really well. I thought he was going to be out for ages, but he bounced back by heading to Cage Warriors and getting 2 nice wins there, which maybe proves that he's over having his leg like torn to shreds. Pedro's coming off 2 wins. Now, one of these was by leg kicks, by, spamming leg kicks. And he looked really, really good after having 3 bad losses earlier on in his career. He did the right thing. He took some time off, and he's looked really destructive since coming back. I think this is what's making me lean towards Pedro. He has really good leg kicks, and with Bukauskas coming off the injury that he had to his legs, I think that spamming those leg kicks could really destabilize Modestas early and slow down his output. So for that reason, I'm picking Pedro to soften the legs and then catching Bukauskas when he gets a little desperate and comes in swinging. I think this is going to be relatively quick. I do think Bukauskas is a good fighter, but I think he's going to get KO'd here, and I think it's going to be for that reason. I hope I'm wrong, because Modestas is younger. He has much more of a ceiling, but I think he gets clipped in this one, and I don't see this one going the distance either. So again, if you don't fancy either of these men, a play under 2.5 might be a smart choice to make. Okay, so these are like a view of what I'd consider my decent prelim picks are. You've obviously got Tukhugov on the money line, Lookboonmee on the money line, and I think that one goes the distance. A Jack Jenkins KO should get you a decent payout, because he's fairly wide on the money line, but if you go for KO, I think you can get him at nearly evens, so that's a fairly decent play to make. Clayton Rodriguez on the money line, I'd probably take as well. Culibao, Bagdasaryan not to go the distance, because I think these two are going to, go headhunting, and that could result in a very quick fight. And Pedro on the money line. Now, Tukhugov is heavily favored in his fight, but because of that, there's expected to be a finish, and I think his opponent is surprisingly... he's quite resilient, and I think he might last the distance in there. Another long shot would be Blake Bilder by KO. He's quite an underdog, and if you add a KO to that, that could be a decent long shot, because he's got some explosive power, and I think he could get the job done there. And also Prado, who's facing Jamie Mullarkey, he's a very huge underdog, and I think he's being undervalued. So Prado on the money line would be good. Right, so thanks very much for tuning in for the prelims. I'm going to upload this video on Monday evening, so I'm hoping to have the main card one done by Tuesday. Thanks very much to all those who are keeping up the views. I've honestly been blown away. I was not expecting to get this amount of views at this point, so I'm honestly delighted. Thanks to everyone who's been tuning in, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.